It's a very fun video today. Today I'm going to be discussing animal familiars. Before we get into it, I have to offer the usual disclaimer that there are just as many ways of practicing witchcraft out there as there are witches, which means that my opinion on what an animal familiar is may not completely match what your opinion of what an animal familiar is. That doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong, and it doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. It just means we have conflicting opinions, and that is perfectly acceptable, as no two people have to practice in exactly the same way. So please, by all means, feel free to comment below what you think an animal familiar is and maybe the names of some of your animal familiars and what they are. But do not attack anyone, including me, in the comments, or call anyone ignorant or stupid for having a different idea of what one is than you. Moving on. Let's start with the basics. What is an animal familiar in witchcraft? When most people hear the word familiar, they automatically think of cats, because cats are what the media and even in ancient times, people who were afraid of witches tended to put alongside the image of the witch. So that's just kind of what people automatically think of when they hear that word. However, a familiar can really be any animal, any species of animal at all, honestly, because it's less about the type of animal and more about the connection. An animal familiar is not a pet. I want to put that out there right now, because sometimes I see some misinformation spread, especially on Tumblr, but who's really surprised about that? And people just, buy a cat from a pet store and automatically say, this is my familiar, look at my cute little familiar, and it's actually a pet. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a witch who has pets, and there's nothing wrong with being a witch who rescues animals. In fact, that's a wonderful service that you're performing if you are rescuing animals in need. But the main difference between a pet and a familiar is that a pet is an animal that you have in your possession, that you have a very strong heart bond with. You love the animal, you enjoy having the animal around. It's your pet. You have all those same emotions you would. If you're someone who has a pet, you understand what I'm getting at. A familiar, on the other hand, is an animal you have a strong psychic bond with, a strong magical bond with. So I have a familiar and I have a pet in the room with me right now. The pet is really sweet. I love cuddling her, I love kissing her and snuggling her, but she wouldn't really be that useful in witchcraft itself for the most part, because I have a strong heart connection to her and I adore her, but that psychic link just isn't there. Most of the time, you won't find your familiar will find you. They'll show up when you least expect them, and you'll immediately feel this strong connection with them. And it's not like, oh, look at the cute little puppy. It's more like, wow, I can really feel that animal's energy. I feel like I can communicate with it. I feel like I can truly understand what the animal's trying to say to me. And a lot of people believe that the reason you get this strong connection with the animal when it finds you is because it is a manifestation of your spirit guide. Your spirit guide decides, for whatever reason, it wants to physically manifest to be with you in a more physical sense, so it goes into this animal body. I actually have two familiars. One of them doesn't live with me anymore, though unfortunately she lives with my parents, and she showed up at the most bizarre time. I had recently lost my cat Peanut. It wasn't good circumstances. It was really violent and horrible, and I don't want to get into it because it'll be really distressing. But it was bad enough that I can't watch movies anymore that involve a cat getting hurt or killed. That's how bad it was. It will trigger me and send me into a full panic attack. So naturally, because of the nature of how I lost him, I kind of had a mental breakdown for 2 full months. Even though I was sick, I was going out in the snow and the cold in complete denial, thinking if I call his name enough times, he's just gonna come back to me somehow. And right when I finally gave up and realized I'm never seeing my baby again, my sister yells from in the barn, "I think Peanut's in here." And I'm like, oh my goodness. I run out there, and what you need to understand is, although we have a barn, we very rarely get stray animals in our barn. We'll get an odd cat here and there, but it tends to just come and go, like it'll show up during a rainstorm and then leave and we never see it again. That's basically all that ever happened. In the back of the hayloft, there's this little peach-colored cat. And I'm like, that's not Peanut. I can tell it's not my Peanut. And I start interacting with her, and she's absolutely terrified. She's hissing, she's growling, she's swinging at everyone in my family except for me. And right away, even though I was at first kind of disappointed that it wasn't Peanut, I was looking her in the eye, and we just stare at each other for a minute, and she immediately just calmed down. And I started to just understand exactly what she needed. So every single day I would go outside for an hour and interact with her, and I understood and felt this cat in a way I've never understood and felt any other animal in my entire life, and I've had pets since I was born. She was healing me. She got really attached to me really quickly. If my family members came near me, she'd be like, "Rah!" And I'm like, "That's my human, leave it alone." And I was like, "Calm down, Peach." And ever since then, we've just been really close, even though most of the time if a cat hasn't seen its person in a long time, they completely forget you. They don't remember who you are at all. It's just how their minds work. I will be gone for 2 years, unable to visit my family, and when I go back up, she just acts like I was gone for an hour. But if anyone else leaves, she forgets them. It's just this whole crazy thing. She's always been my little familiar. She would just show up. I'd be deep in the woods doing secret rituals and stuff because I was still in the broom closet at the time I was living there. And she would just show up, and the energy she brought to the space would make the ritual so much better and so much stronger for me. And that's what her little son does for me too. Peach very suddenly became pregnant, and I wasn't expecting it because she found me when she was a few years old already and already pregnant. And she had 5 babies. Pooh Bear is the only one I've had this psychic link with. I just know exactly what he's trying to tell me at all times. He knows what I need. I will be in an immense amount of physical pain. Everyone else in the house will think I'm asleep. He will come up, get on the bed, and start working on me. He'll start healing me in whatever way he can. And just like Peach, he makes my rituals and my spell work so much stronger when he's around. It will just go from 5 to 20 as soon as he enters the room. So a pet and a familiar are not the same thing. I'm sorry to say, there's nothing wrong with having pets, as I said before, but they're not the same as familiars. So next order of business, should you have a familiar? Well, it sounds a little bit rude, but there's just no better way for me to explain it other than a familiar, in a way, is a witch's tool. Just like any other witch's tool, it's something that we use to make our craft better in some way or another. So just like with all other witch's tools, it does help. It does benefit you a lot to have a familiar. It will make your craft stronger and elevate it to a state that you were never aware you'd be able to get to on your own. But that being said, it is your choice. You do not have to accept a familiar into your life. You may not be able to deal with one right now. Maybe you don't have the money to care for it. and you may not want one. The familiar will come to you, and it will only remain if you accept it for the most part. It might stick around for a little while to see if you change your mind, but if you completely reject it, it's going to move on to somebody else and be their familiar instead. So if you notice that you see an animal you believe is a potential familiar and you're like, I really don't think I'm in the state to have this animal in my life right now, just don't accept it in a kind way. Don't like chase it off or anything, just don't accept it in a kind way. There is no unspoken rule in the universe that says that because you're a witch, you have to use witch's tools. You can be a solitary witch who only uses what's in your head and what's in your heart and the use of your hands, and that is perfectly acceptable. It makes me a little bit crazy sometimes seeing online when, you try to find a new spell or a new ritual, for example, and you go on forums or you go on Tumblr or something and you see a spell for something that you've been needing for a while, and it's like you need 2 pieces of quartz and you need an entire geode and you need a brand new spell book and you need 6 feathers of this exact color, and you're just like, oh man, I cannot afford that. I'm a poor witch, I don't have any money. As a poor witch, I can tell you right now, I do a lot of my rituals either just in my mind and in my third eye and stuff, or in nature, and I utilize what nature offers to me, and that is okay. When it comes to familiars or any other tool, never feel like you're obligated to use a material possession to be a good witch. You are the good witch. Tools just help elevate you. That's all they're there for. You have the power, they just help you hone it in. I like discussing tools of witchcraft and ways to either get good material possessions or utilize what, like I said, nature offers you. I'm going to be continuing talking about different witches' tools in the future on this channel, so if that's something you think you're interested in, go ahead and subscribe and keep an eye on that little witchy playlist that I have going on. They will all end up in that playlist. And I hope you enjoyed this. As always, do something that makes you happy, no matter what anyone else thinks about it, and I will see all of you soon.